Good morning, everybody. I think most people are there. Maybe some people are still arriving, which is okay. So welcome all to the second edition of the LU-CIX DDoS fighting webinar. We had this already a few years back. We decided to redo this since DDoS is still a topic of very much interest. And with the geopolitical situation, which you cannot avoid naming if you talk DDoS, the situation hasn't improved at all. We have a few speakers today, 5 of them. But before we go there, let me give you a few informations for the housekeeping. So you cannot speak up, but if you have questions, please ask them in the chat during the presentation. I will notice them and I will read them out to the speakers so you can answer your question. We don't have a Q&A at the end of the webinar, and hopefully, if I don't lose too much time, we'll be done for lunch. The agenda for today is this one here. We have 5 presentations, as I said. We have CIRCL going into some informations about DDoS, what it is, what are current actors, how they do that. Then we have Gcore presenting on how you go about defending in different layers. Then we have Post will talk to us about what comes after the classical volume-based DDoS attack. We'll have then Radware talking to us about how they go about defending against DDoS attacks and what means they have at their disposal. And we'll finish it off with Telindus. We'll also talk about combating and fighting more modern DDoS attacks. So this is the agenda for today. But first, let me give you your first to-do list for today. What is on that list? Well, if you want to if you want to be serious about fighting DDoS, there are 3 things that you need to keep in mind. First, you need to be able to detect the attack. Then you need to be able to connect to your systems. May sound obvious, but if your internet link is fully blasted by a DDoS attack, then maybe your VPN will not work. So you need to have your means to connect to your systems. And then only can you think about defending against the attack, which will maybe the main topic of our presenters later on. So what can you do to detect the attack? Well, you could have an outside monitoring. For instance, there are a number of free or commercial website monitoring tools. And why not start with the free one and improve on that one later on? You could also have your inside monitoring, and I hope you do have that, but it needs to be able to alert you. So you also need to have some kind of out-of-band alerting so that the alert gets from your attacked system out to you. You may have some specific DDoS detection means on-premise within your infrastructure so that they can already differentiate between any other kind of impact or a real DDoS attack. And of course, it could be part of your commercial anti-DDoS service to alert you once you are hit by an attack. But again, out of band is really critical. If your monitoring means or your alerting means are also impacted by the DDoS attack, then it doesn't help you a lot and you're still blind. Now, you need to connect to your systems because if you have a DDoS attack, you will have to do something on your systems, most probably. You will either have to check what's up, you will have to verify the health of your systems. So it's critical, it's really crucial that you can connect to your systems. So a good idea would be to have an out-of-band VPN remote access. It could also be that rely on on-site personnel, but that depends if your services are offered 24/7. And maybe in the night you don't have anybody on site and you would like to connect remotely. Then it's critical that you have an out-of-band VPN access. It's also important that you have a detailed view of what's happening, what's going on. So be sure that you can look at those logs, check your system health, have your dashboards maybe, And also packet capture can be very helpful to identify what's going on and if you are suffering a DDoS attack, and in that case also what kind of attack this is. Then only can you think about defending against that DDoS attack, where typically we see different layers of defense that you can have. You should have a few of your own means to defend against a DDoS attack. For instance, for application layer attacks, you could have some means yourself. Then, of course, your service provider could help you with defending a DDoS attack. And a number of them offer commercial anti-DDoS services, so have a look at those. And for really huge attacks, and depending on your risk assessment, you could also benefit from the service of a cloud DDoS provider. Note that in most cases, this will somehow be a compromise on how far you can yourself block the attack, also what kind and what size of attack you are looking at, and what impact you can tolerate on your application. If the application is not really important or not doing any 24/7 services, then maybe what's happening during the night is not of importance, but maybe it is. So this is all about assessing your risk, exposure, and what you will suffer as a damage in case of a DDoS attack. So this is what I wanted to tell you. So let's go back to the agenda for today, which is this one here. And with that, let me introduce the first speaker, who is Gérard Wagner. He is with CIRCL, the Luxembourg Incident Response Team. And he will talk to us about what are DDoS attacks, what's currently cooking, what are modern attacks, who is attacking you potentially. So Gérard, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. So I will just put my slides on. So my name is Gérard Wagner. I'm working at the Computer Incident Response Center in Luxembourg. So we are an entity that is financed by the Ministry of Economy, and some of our activities are financed via various European projects. So our goal is to provide to the private sector incident response services and also information sharing services. And then often we get some requests for support for denial of service attacks. So what normally for the first, what we ask is like Michel already mentioned, if we have someone that is calling us and asking for a denial of service attack, claiming that they have a denial of service attack, we first have to find out, to verify if it's really a denial of service attack or if it's a misconfiguration or an outage. So that's really the first step that you have to do. And of course, it's really important that you have this monitoring aspects in place and that you can collect some evidences, because just with the evidences, then from there you can then go for the mitigation of the attacks. And then but sometimes we have some victims that don't have any evidences at all. So there are some additional sources on DDoS. For instance, there are some organizations that that follow the different attacker groups. So, and then if you see then in some attacker groups that, okay, they are discussing about a dedicated victim, and so, okay, then you can do also the reverse way around. So you can then inform the victim and tell them, okay, there is an attacker group that is targeting you. They are preparing the attack, or they started already, and they are using various techniques. So like this, you can also support the victims if they don't have very precise monitoring and evidences collection mechanisms in place. But then the reaction on how to react to the denial of service attack really depends also on which kind of attacker you have you are facing, because they have different goals, and the different goals of the different attackers, I'm just explaining them a bit in this talk. So various years before, around 2011, we had a lot of activists, so various groups that are self-proclaimed, so that did a lot of denial of service attacks, but for mainly political political motivations. But yeah, but these people, they're organized, somehow organized people, but they are not covered, sponsored by a nation. But then a few years ago, we saw that some nations, or some states, they integrated in their portfolio some cyber attacker groups, so to do some offensive operations, and then they decided to sponsor some attacker groups. And if you have a sponsored attacker group, of course, then they are mainly related, mainly linked to political motivations. And then since also a very long time, there are the cyber criminals, so mainly the guys that are operating botnets. So who control a large infrastructure of hijacked infrastructure that they control with via different malware and command and control servers. And of course, these cyber criminals mainly focus on financial gain, so they want they offer, for instance, their denial of service attack as a service. But then to make the items a bit more complex, you have some attackers. So there is a lot of mixing between the different actors. So for instance, the cyber criminals, okay, they saw that, okay, if you offer your service for different states or nations, then you can have a quite stable source of revenue, because you can then do DDoS over a long time. The same for the activists. Some activists, they get some funding due to state-sponsored attacks. And yeah, then it's a bit mixed. So we have, so let's talk a bit about the objective of the attacker groups and how to identify them. So an attacker group that you can identify quite easily is if there is the state-sponsored groups, because if you do, if you follow, for instance, if you plot all the messages, the interactions these groups are doing, then you normally see regular business patterns. So you see then, okay, they are working, for instance, from 8 to 5. And then you also discover the public holidays they have, because if you have each time a hole in their activities, in the map, if you have a hole for some days, and then you can then find out which public holidays is there. So normally they are they are linked with these cyber divisions that are doing that are linked to some various ministries of the different nations that are doing offensive operations, for instance, executing denial of service attacks. But what we noticed a lot is that these two groups, they are going hand in hand with the dis and misinformation campaigns. So in the first step, the guys from the misinformation campaigns, they do campaigns to create some fear about people, about political decisions that they took, and then afterwards the DDoS guys, they will hit, and then people will see then, oh, they now attack us, so that's why also they attack normally low-hanging fruits, so non-critical systems, public websites, because they want to have maximum of visibility. Because anyone can see, okay, if a public website is down, then anyone can see, then even non-technical people can see if it's down, and then they say, oh, they attacked us, and they increase this fear that the misinformation guys wanted to create. And then there is, if you have these guys, what is the most important items they are looking for? It's the media coverage. So because they go hand in hand with the dis and misinformation team, so they wanted to have to spread their mis and disinformation as fast as possible. They want to spread their narratives, political narratives, as fast as possible. And if you talk more about your DDoS attack, the more you support these attackers, because the more it's in the media and the more the narrative is promoted. So and then afterwards, of course, these groups that are working, doing the regular state servant work patterns, working for these various governments, they have some payment models in place. For instance, they pay some attacker groups, they are paid then in Monero for doing the attacks, and to get then some, so they have to provide some evidence as how much attacks they executed in some time, and then they get paid. So the hacktivists, they were some active since a longer time. So if you look at the different patterns where they have their activities, it's more messy. So it's not from 8 to 5, but it's covering all the different time, even if they are working sometimes on mainly sometimes outside business hours or on public holidays. And they want to attract mainly the attention of media to some cause, but something that matters for them. And then also they are also looking for media coverage. So also they sometimes they use also similar techniques than the state-sponsored attacks. So, but they often use also defacement techniques for defacing websites, for putting their messages. But the more media coverage they get, the more they continue the attack. So the cyber criminals. So these guys are mainly commercial guys. So they wanted so they operate their botnet. So they have so they don't have to pay for the infrastructure that they compromised, but still they need to invest some efforts to maintain it. And they wanted to pay these efforts by offering, for instance, DDoS for hire. So you can go to various onion sites, for instance, on Tor, where you can then find some, get in contact with them. So they have normally some chat rooms or forums where you can ask your denial of service attack, and then you negotiate the payment with them. So, but normally they put a lot of effort to be anonymously, so because they don't want it to be tracked down by law enforcement. And where we observe them a lot is in gaming and gambling industry, because there because there is a high competition, and and so these attacker groups also target mainly real-time applications that not hurt more than the state-sponsored attack that mainly often just target public websites. So what we observed is we observed two kind of operations of the different attacker groups. So you have some attacker groups so that rely on these botnets. So so they compromised some infrastructure, and then on this compromised infrastructure they installed some malware, and then these malware samples are then capable of doing some attacks. So and then these malware samples, they will connect them to the command and control servers. They will get then instructions for doing these attacks. So these bots are quite useful if you can collect them, because there is a possibility some people are doing the reverse engineering of these bots, and then you can then find out which kind of attacks these bots are capable of doing, how they are doing it, which queries they generate, etc. And then you have these other attacker groups, mainly used by the hacktivists and state-sponsored attacks. So they install denial of service tool on their infrastructure that they control. And then these tools they use commonly used stressor tools for stressing, doing stress tests of infrastructures, and then they coordinate the different attacks via the different chat groups for instance, to support novice users because who cannot install the tool properly, people that cannot compile the tool or install it, so they provide some support. And then what they often do is they closely monitor the public reaction of the victim. And then, normally the more the victim communicates about it, the better it is for the attackers. But before doing the attack, what the attackers do, they do a kind of reconnaissance, because so what do they do then? They will connect. First in their various communication channels, they are discussing which victims they wanted to attack next. Then and then they start to explore these victims. So and then they to which kind of infrastructures they have, and then they look for systems that are exposed, that are easily exploitable targets. Then, for instance, what they use is they really wanted to have the less effort as possible for doing the attacks. Although if they have a lot of bandwidth, for instance, if they see that you have a very heavy website where we have user registration and a lot of resource-intensive CPU functions, then of course they will target for that. And then during the operations, they have different chat rooms. So they have chat rooms for attracting the attention. So because this is mainly for doing influence in their so to get other cyber criminals and activists to join them. Then they have some recruitment campaigns. So where you can apply and then you say, hey, I wanted to join your denial of service group, and then you have to do some process to get recruited by them. And then some of them, they have some chat rooms where they announce to sell some services, for instance, new malware that they have, DDoS for hire and stuff like that. And then and for instance, to operate a botnet or to install some tools, they have some chat rooms for providing support services where they support the users how to do the DDoS and how to install the tools properly. Then they operate, of course, some C2 servers, command and control servers, but then sometimes it happens that an abuse teams take down some C2 server or law enforcement takes it down. So then they have to coordinate between each other to set up to move the botnet, for instance, to another C2 server. And then they have dedicated chat rooms for that. And then they have some chat rooms for exporting all kind of compromised data. So if they get some configurations and internal information, so they share this with each other. And in the last chat room, what they have is they show off exploits and proof of concept. This is normally what we observed. So normally when they are doing the attacks, so they start. So after the reconnaissance, they use just a subset of bots or subsets of tools or users that should start the attackers. But they really wanted to test if their infrastructure works for doing the DDoS, and also they wanted to see if the monitoring capabilities of the victim. So if the victim is quickly able to detect the DDoS or if it stays unnoticed. So that's what they are doing there. And then they use, as Mich advised already before, so you have some services that are there that you can use to check your availability. So these services are probing your web server from multiple locations from the different ASN numbers, and then you can see then if it's available or not. And the attackers, they are really using these two. And then they use also, they follow also your DDoS mitigation strategy, and they adjust their tactics. So it's really a cat and mouse game. So and then to end this cat and mouse game, okay, you have to ensure that the attacker lose the interest in you as victim. And then the reactions of the different attackers can take up from few hours to several hours. So So yeah, we had some examples where a victim changed IP address, then the attacker continued to attack the wrong IP address, and then it took them several hours to notice that the IP address changed. So, and then for the mitigation technique, so we are not selling any DDoS services, so we are there for helping the non-critical infrastructure and the private sector. So yeah, our first task that we really have to do is to find out if it's really a DDoS attack. And then there are some different strategy. So, but this is really like that you have to clarify with your organization. The easiest strategy is to create the impression that you are offline, to give the impression to the attackers that they are successful, but they are not, because you fool their monitoring systems. And but then, of course, okay, this is then in the chat rooms of different attackers, they are celebrating because you are offline, and but in fact you are not offline. That's one strategy, the easiest one, because sometimes we notice that, okay, changing just the IP address sometimes goes unnoticed because they start to attack the wrong one. They check their monitoring system. They know, okay, the service is really down. And then you can also play a bit. So you can have this, when you know the monitoring systems they are using, you switch off then just a few from monitoring systems from a few ASN, and they say, oh, it's the victim is still accessible from these and these countries. And then half an hour you block these monitoring systems as well. Then they see, now we are more successful than before, and then they are celebrating it. But in fact, you are blocking just their monitoring system. And then what we advise to the victims that that were not very well prepared, quick solutions. So for instance, disable the user registration, search functions, because these are often targeted by the bots. So all the endpoints that are encoded in the bots, you just disable these queries to reduce the load. Then what we observed as well is the geofencing worked in some cases, but then the attackers, they took a reaction. So for instance, to tunnel their attack traffic through VPN services. So, but the best solution that on the long term is, if you are facing regular DDoS attacks, is to subscribe to a DDoS mitigation service. So, and then what we advise is, if you have a DDoS, then don't hesitate to share this information. They are dedicated. So we operate multiple sharing communities, for instance, where people can report technical evidences, chat rooms, or onion sites provided by the different attacker groups, so that then afterwards they can be monitored. Also, the log files and packet captures are often sometimes useful to get some insights on the how the attacks are working. And then, of course, if you find on a compromised infrastructure different attacker tools for doing denial of service attack, of course, those are also useful to share it with the threat sharing communities, because you can do reverse engineering on them and find weaknesses of them, and abuse these weaknesses for mitigation. So to conclude, we prepared some times ago a DDoS mitigation document, a public document. So to avoid the stress, the best is to prepare against a denial of service attack before you have it, because it's way less stress, because you have also to do some changes on your infrastructure. There we have a public document that you can just use it. And then what we notice is you have to drill and to exercise your DDoS mitigation measures from time to time, because if you just do it once a year or every 2 years, then you can't remember the exact commands and what you should, and then it's also a bit stressful. And then the most important one is to not reveal to reveal as less as information to the attacker as possible, and to really watch out if you communicate about denial of service attacks, because if you communicate a lot about it, then of course some attacker groups like the activists and state-sponsored attackers, they will stay. So now I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Gérard. I don't see any questions in the chat at this time. I have a question for you. Could you enter the URLs to the two documents that you had on your last slide into the chat so that people can copy it off from there? I think that would be helpful because I think those documents are really contain a lot of valuable information, especially if you're still looking at how you can position yourself against the risk of DDoS attacks. And then this is a very good document with lots of reference.
Okay, I will put them there.
That would be very helpful. Thank you for that. Then don't see any questions popping up, which means that I will thank you, Gérard, for this presentation. Very helpful, especially as an introduction to get a view on who are the attackers and who you need to take care of. So thank you very much. Which brings us then to the next presenter. The next presenter is Andrey SLASTENOV of Gcore. Gcore is a Luxembourg company, but with a global footprint. It's very interesting to see this company evolve and how they get bigger and what they develop as services. And today, Andrey will talk to us about their approach to layered defense against DDoS attacks. Andrey? Up to you.
Good morning, everyone. Just give me a second to share my presentation. Okay. So, greetings, everyone, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. My name is Andrey SLASTENOV. I'm head of DDoS protection product in Gcore. And in today's presentation, we will talk about the modern threats facing web resources and infrastructure, tools that are able to protect these resources, and we debunk common misconception about these tools. Also, I will focus on the concept of multi-layered protection, which can significantly enhance security level and provide reliable defense against potential attacks. So, how the cyber threats looks like in the modern world. Currently, the range of threats we might encounter is expanding, and the complexity of these attacks is increasing. Modern cyber criminals often use combined tactics such as, for example, social engineering attacks along with the phishing and ransomware. So to pick up with the modern challenges, security solutions are also becoming more complex and require more complex development and testing. So as an example, one of the recent incidents with the CrowdStrike underscores the complexity and fragility of this software. So detailed review of all methods for counteracting this long list of the threats will take a significant amount of time. So today I would like to focus on the specific class of the cyber threats that's quite widespread on the internet. So we will discuss the DDoS attacks targeting infrastructure, web applications, and API. So the question may rise, what makes this class of the threats special and what unifies them? First of all, when we talk about the full spectrum of existing threats, we can always mitigate some risk by implementing certain strict restrictions. For example, if we discuss in the social engineering, we can reduce risk by conducting employee trainings. If we are talking about the brute force or account takeovers, we can implement some restrictions such as IP-based limits or even completely restrict access to authentication systems from the internet or from certain countries. However, there is a specific class of resources that we cannot hide within our infrastructure or restrict external access to, because there's resources by their very nature need to be accessible to everyone. So I'm referring primarily to public services such as websites, VPN gateways, DNS servers, commercial and gaming services, public infrastructure of the large enterprises, data centers, and service providers. So today I want to touch of this topic, discussing both financial, reputational risks that these attacks can bring to that exposed resources and the tools that help us to counter these threats. So when discussing the current situation with the cyber threats, their quantity and the potential risks to the business, we can see that the number of cybersecurity incidents and the overall financial impact of the cyber crimes have been increased year by year. We particularly observed a sharp rise in the attack from 2019 to 2020 to primarily related to the global COVID-19 pandemic. So during this period, many businesses moved online and large number of people began working remotely from home. And this led to a surge in internet services, with many companies needing to shift their services to the internet and provide employees with access to the local resources and data. In the same time, there was an increase in cybercrime using the internet to target online resources, particularly DDoS attacks on infrastructure and attacks on the web application. And as we can see, this growth trend has not stopped, but continued to rise, forcing businesses to invest more in security and personal data protection. For the modern companies, the risk associated with the attacks on the public infrastructure are quite broad. First and foremost, the financial losses arise from the service unavailability. For instance, if a company sells products online, downtime of the e-commerce site will leads to direct financial losses. The next one is reputational risks. This risk is also significant, as the clients may lose trust in the business, especially if the cybersecurity incident involves the breach of the personal data. Moreover, such incidents can lead to legal consequences, including fines and lawsuits from the clients and the government structure. In addition to direct financial losses, there is also indirect costs associated with incident remediation. Furthermore, the leakage of the personal data on the internet pose the other potential risks for your clients, as their data may be misused by malicious actors, and they can use this data to conduct even more attacks using, for example, stealed credentials. So all of that above brings us to substantial impact of the company and worsens its competitive position in the market. If we talk about DDoS attacks, and if we just dig in what DDoS attack is and how DDoS protection works, a DDoS attack, or distributed denial of service, involves a series of actions by an attacker designed to fully or partially disable the resource, usually by overloading the server capacity or infrastructure capacity to process the traffic with large number of the requests or packets. As the results, the users, the legitimate users, may be unable to access the system resources, or that access may be just hindered. The goal of the DDoS protection solution is to filter out all non-legitimate traffic while allowing legitimate requests to pass freely. So that's I want to emphasize on this because it's pretty much important. We should block all bad traffic and allow all good traffic. During the DDoS attacks, usually the client don't feel any difference between the normal working resource and resource under the DDoS attack. So this is the goal of DDoS protection solution. DDoS protection solution typically operates on different levels of the OCI model, such as layer 3, layer 4, and layer 7. Just want to give you an example of different types of attack on the different levels of the OSI model. One notable example occurred in January 2023 when Gcore successfully mitigated a large-scale attack. This attack primarily used UDP flood technique, which are common at layer 3, layer 4. The attack reached a peak of 500 million packets per second, with total capacity of the traffic exceeding 800 gigabit per second. So L3, L4 attack usually targeted to overload your infrastructure with a lot of traffic. Another good example is, I think it's pretty much famous, the HTTP2 rapid test, the reset attack in Q3 2023. So it's another good example of layer 7 DDoS attack. This attack exploited a vulnerability in HTTP2 protocol, where the attackers rapidly open and close streams, leading to resource exhaustion on the target servers. And that's a good example of layer 7 attack, because in this case, the attacker is not trying to overload the infrastructure by amount of traffic, but attacker trying to overload the particular resource, particular server, and their processing resources with amount of the requests. So, and just to wrap up everything, it's important to recognize that no resources accessible through the internet is immune to DDoS attack. All resources with the IP address routable over the internet can be targeted by such attack. And from our experience, the commonly targeted resources are websites and web applications. So they usually front end of the businesses, accessible of millions of users daily. And it means that the countermeasures that you can use to protect your website is pretty much limited. So just agree with the previous presenter that we, of course, can use the geo filtering. We can try to pretend that that resource went offline, but usually it works pretty bad for the public applications on the web sites, and which should be available to everyone. The another common target is network infrastructure. This includes the servers, routers, and other critical components that keep our online our services online, like our DNS, VPN servers, gaming servers, and other. So attacker just trying to attack not the particular service, but trying to attack the underlying infrastructure. So attack of their type can cause widespread disruption, affecting the multiple services at once, or fully outage of one particular service. For example, if you have a data center, even within your enterprise organization, the attacker can just start the huge attack overloading your uplinks, and your whole data center starts to be unavailable. And another type, the modern type of the attacks, is attacks targeted the API and online services. As more businesses move towards the microservices and cloud-based architecture, API are becoming an important part of the operation. API can cripple essential functions, from processing payments to accessing the critical data. And if we will talk about the typical components of DDoS protection, there's components includes their access control mechanism. So there's, I would say that there is 4 different major types of components of DDoS, common DDoS protection system. So it consists of access control mechanism which includes various tools for restricting access to the resources, such as allow deny lists, reputational lists, access control lists, and authentication methods like a TCP cookie challenge. Another essential component is the rate limiter, which helps reduce the impact of a DDoS attack on the resources. The mechanism operates in conjunction with other components like signature analysis and machine learning, because the rate limiter itself, of course, can limit your impact of DDoS attack, but usually it also hit hard the legitimate traffic. If you don't use this rate limiter in conjunction with signature analysis, by rate limiting not all the traffic, but only rate limiting or even the block completely a malicious request by some specific signatures. So the signature analysis involves identifying the specific data patterns within traffic, which is usable for blocking well-known attacks and vulnerabilities, or even the malicious patterns of the traffic, especially when blocking based on IP address alone is not possible. So that situation arises quite often, especially if the clients who are trying to access the resources use NAT, and from if attackers just trying to use the well-known ranges of the IP addresses. So machine learning is particularly effective against various types of automated activities where the traffic itself may appear legitimate. So when the attacker trying to mimic the legitimate traffic, but it used to overload the resources. It allows for blocking such traffic based on behavior analysis, not by even the content of the traffic, by comparing the traffic profile with normal user behavior in applications or on a website. So attack itself generally falls into a few main categories. The first is volumetric attack. So there's attacks flood the target bandwidth, which can affect anything from the individual users or individual servers to entire data centers or even service providers. So how they work? Attacker use methods like UDP floods, ICMP floods, and amplifications strategy to block legitimate access to the servers and applications. So just overload the uplink or even the link between the server and infrastructure with the huge amount of traffic, and the normal resources cannot reach the final, normal requests cannot reach the final destination. Amplification and reflection attacks, a type of volumetric attacks, but often discussed separately because of their specific nature. So what they do, attacker exploits weakness in the open internet protocols like DNS, for example, or NTP to send harmful data packets, making legitimate service and apps on their network unavailable. An example of this is DNS reflection attack, NTP reflection attack, memcached attack. So they use the vulnerabilities in applications, on well-known applications on the internet, to amplify the attack to the final destination. So basically, let me just scratch this topic a bit, how it was done by the attacker. So the attacker forged DNS requests, for example, by sending the fake request to the public DNS servers, which vulnerable to that type of attack. And attacker forged the source IP address of that request with IP address of attacked resource, for example, IP address of your infrastructure. Usually that kind of request, DNS request, is pretty small, but reply from DNS server can be pretty much huge. And the attacker just generate a small portion of that kind of traffic to the DNS server, and the target infrastructure or target server get a huge response from the DNS server. So that response is just overwhelm the uplinks or interconnection between server and infrastructure, which leads to unavailability of the server. So another type of attack is protocol attacks. What they do, there's attacks overwhelm network devices or systems that manage outgoing connections by sending too many requests, preventing new users from connecting. So there is two examples. One of them is just to open a lot of TCP sessions with fake TCP sessions with your server, and so much that server cannot process the TCP connections anymore, and the users cannot connect to your server. And another good example that's pretty much a weird example, but it's by overwhelm some stateful TCP protection on the firewall with a lot of TCP sessions. And that's why protecting by firewall and protecting by DDoS protections is pretty much different topic, which usually separated from each other. And the final thing, the most sophisticated attacks is application layer attacks. So there's attacks involve sending malicious requests from the compromised resources to the to target a specific service. I will handle it until it stops responding. So usually when we're talking about the application layer attack, we're talking about the botnet attacks. If we're talking about DDoS, of course. So when first of all, the attacker just emulate the full layer 3, layer 4 stack. So attacker establish TCP session with your server, and it try to overwhelm your application with a lot of like a malicious request, or just not malicious, but with a lot of requests. The good example for that is the botnet targeting which that targets your web server. So botnet open a lot of HTTP connection with the server and start to send very simple and by the nature it's even that not malicious one request, like a get your one of your page, and that's it. Because the amount of the request is so huge, your server cannot process that request anymore. So that's the another type of their attack. So if we're talking, we continue to talk about the web application protection and API protection, we should mention web application firewall and API protection, or WAAP for short. So usually it used together with DDoS layer 3, layer 4 protection solution. So this solution is protect with many types of the attack, from the many types of attack targeted the web resources. So just to wrap up the things, two levels of DDoS protection, WAAP protection. One is protected the infrastructure, another one is protected web application resources. And I want to finalize and just talk about the layered security. So usually when you protect your web application through the internet, you use the web security provider. You just do the DNS redirection when the request, HTTP request, come to the web security provider, and after that to the internet to your web application. But you should consider a volumetric attack also on your infrastructure, because if attacker cannot attack your web server because it was protected by web security provider, he will get your IP addresses from RIPE, for example, and will try to definitely attack your infrastructure. So because there is a lack of time, I will just try to quickly wrap up the topic. So as a Gcore, we provide the unified security solutions. Our solutions are integrated with the CDN. It's provide a comprehensive web security, multi-layer DDoS protection, and efficient traffic handling. So I think that's all for now. And if you have any questions, I can answer it on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrey. Yes, there is a question in the chat. Let me read it to you. So you mentioned preferred DDoS attacks are on layer 3, layer 4, and layer 7.
Yeah.
While layer 3, layer 4 mitigations, countermeasures are quite known in the security community. Gérard mentioned them also. Any deeper insight from your end on protections at layer 7? For example, earlier this year, there were a number of attacks against Luxembourg sites. Any take on that one?
Yeah, sure. So the layer 7 attacks usually try to mimic the application protocol, like HTTP requests. So if we're talking about the HTTP traffic and protection of the website, usually there is a combination of layer 3, layer 4 protection, which is the classical DDoS protection, and web application protection. So for the web application protection, we have WAP product, which can analyze the request by many parameters to understand if that request is legitimate one or not. There is a lot of tricks around it, like, for example, GA3 hash analyzing, reputational database analyzing, and that's how we can protect web applications from the layer 7 attacks. From the another side, if we're talking about other applications, in our layer 3, layer 4 solution, we have layer 7 protection as well by integrating regular expressions analysis with our DDoS protection solution. So we are doing DPI. We can look inside the packet and understand what's happening inside the protocol, which we're trying to protect.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that answers the question. And I don't see any other question online. So with that, thank you very much, Andrey.
Thank you.
It was very insightful. And with that, we can then move on to our next speaker. Next up is Nicolas VILLATTE. He represents a company called Deep, which is new maybe to some people. So Deep is the grouping of all B2B entities of Post. In the invitation, we still said Post, but by now the rebranding is done. So Nicolas now represents Deep, and you can see it on the slide. And he will talk to us about what lies beyond classical DDoS attack mitigation technology. And I think he will also respond to our last question to some extent.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending. So a bit more about myself. So I started my information security career at Swift, which was an internal information security position. Then I went to consulting and focusing more and more on incident response and digital forensics investigation while joining Verizon. And in 2023, I started working at Post, which became so recently Deep as part of a merger of subsidiaries, heading the SOC services and the CSOT services. So usually, and my former colleagues explained that quite well already, so there are classical DDoS mitigation solution that exist, usually provided by your various service providers. Here, for example, is the one from Deep, and they are most of the time focused on volume. Volume about the number of certain type of packets, and some of them they will focus on layer 3 and 4 as indicated earlier, but sometimes they are also focused on layer 7, and some of them are mixing both of the worlds. So just as a nutshell from what we see at Deep on the DDoS protection layers, so you see that there are quite a number of alerts every month. This is the view of last month, for example. And you see that the size of the attack can be counted either in terms of gigabit per second of volume or in terms of packet per second. So depending on the type of attacks, those are the two kind of volumes that can be basically accounted for and detected and mitigated for. If you look at the type of alerts, you see that most of them on the classical attacks are still layer 3 or 4. And if you look at the count, you see that a lot of them are ICMP misuse, which is one of the protocols that you know when you ping, for example, a system. There is some TCP traffic also, and the rest is more marginal, although DNS amplification still exists, but we see it more marginally, at least nowadays. What we see also is that most of the attacks have a duration of less than 30 minutes. It just as Gérard explained in the first presentation, that some attackers, they just try to get the attention, and then when they see that they got the attention, they move on to another target, for example. But then came NoName 57. NoName 57 is an activist group that was basically pro-Russian activist, and we just suffered from them quite recently over the year in 2024. So basically, they started to mainly to attack NATO associate countries and organizations, and then of course, when Luxembourg provided support for Ukraine, it became a target for this group. So what they do is that they do pro-reconnaissance, like Gérard mentioned already. They are an independent group. And what was quite new and part of the new techniques was that they started to try to get people helping them in their attacks and through gamification. So they try to make challenge for the people participating on top of being pro-Russian, and also the results on the successfulness of the attack on checkos.net, for example, and Gérard mentioned that kind of monitoring aspect on their part also. And then that was also mentioned, this specific group was also rewarding the activists based on their contribution level and the gamification system, also via cryptocurrency. So it allowed them to attract even more people. So what happened is that because they use a technique that couldn't distinguish themselves from legitimate users, we couldn't block that at first. So we started to perform a just incident response and to start to analyze the logs to see what we could see if there was really no differentiation pattern. And we saw based first on the peak of the attack. So we saw that the peak of the attack was between 12 and 4 p.m. And we saw that in terms of countries, traffic from ISP, different ISP and country, there were at some point peaks in mostly ISP, but also some countries. So that was potentially a way to differentiate them, although we knew that there were a lot of different countries, but we have customers reaching the website that could be from various countries. Some people could be on holiday. So while we knew that there was an anomaly here, we couldn't legitimately block, or we would deny the service to those people also. So as you see on the right, on the top right side, there is a distribution on the different countries, and still a lot of traffic was generated from Luxembourg, but there was also a huge spike in other countries. What we saw also is that all the traffic in this specific attack was HTTPS, not HTTP, but HTTPS. Why? Because they were targeting first HTTPS because you have an overhead because of the encryption on the service. So it adds the load to the specific queries. And then we started to dig in a bit more into the attack itself. Based on that, we learned some lessons by dealing with the incident. First, you cannot rely only on the DDoS mitigation solution because most of them are volumetric and they need to have a pattern. Even the most advanced one using machine learning or artificial intelligence, they require to be able to determine a pattern, to be able to block that pattern. So while this is still useful, don't mistake me, it's not enough. So what you need to also plan is incident response. So you need to be able to have a team or a service provider that will help you into analyzing the incident, having playbooks potentially at hand to be to develop procedures like, for example, geofencing, to be able to plan in advance on who will do that, when do we accept to perform geofencing because there might be an impact, how can we prepare the impact and already pre-analyze to avoid the side effect that I mentioned on the geofencing aspects. Ensure, of course, that you have up-to-date asset inventory and network diagrams, because a lot of companies, they don't have that, and they don't necessarily know where is the device in the network, how it is protected by potentially web application, firewalls, etc., and how the load could be spread onto the system. And also the criticity of the system, because sometimes the attackers, they don't know the criticity of the systems, so they will attack like 4 or 5 websites. Some of them might not be as critical as the others, so it's better to be prepared for that, to prioritize your effort on the ones that are critical, obviously. Then ensure that you have proper monitoring of your critical service availability, and the web ones in this case, of course, because sometimes you don't even have a proper availability monitoring. So you will not detect unless the DDoS protection device detects it. Then if the DDoS protection device doesn't detect it because it's a non-volumetric attack, then you are blind to the attack, and you just have customers, for example, who are reporting the fact that your service is not available anymore. So you are losing control, and you're not proactive anymore on the situation. So keep out of the box and out of your network potentially also proper monitoring to be early on the attack, and to start the incident response early on during this attack. Ensure, of course, that you have up-to-date patch system and application, because sometimes they will, and that's usually what the DDoS layer protection are doing, they will try to mitigate vulnerability attacks on those protocols that will introduce availability issues and vulnerabilities. Ensure that you have proper security baseline configuration, because outside of the vulnerabilities, sometimes the weakness is due to lack of proper security hardening of the system. And likewise for the APIs that were mentioned previously also. The APIs, as you saw in the requests that were used by this attacking group, they were targeting APIs. And of course, APIs sometimes they are not built in with security from by design, and they might present not really weaknesses, but a load that is unexpected and can be exploited by attackers like this one, who perform a reconnaissance to recognize those weaker APIs in terms of load intensity. And last but not least, like we start to be used to perform periodically penetration testing, as part of the penetration testing exercise, a stress test on the load of your systems regularly, to prevent and to mitigate upfront those kind of DDoS attacks. That's it for my presentation, and I'm open for additional questions.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. I don't see a question at this time. A reminder to all attendees, if you look in the chat, so you have some information there. For instance, Gcore gave some more details on the question that was asked earlier, so that might potentially be useful to you as well. So have a look at the chat, and also Gérard copied the URLs of their documents, so don't hesitate to copy that information out of the chat. So thank you very much, Nicolas, for this insight, I would say deep insight, no pun intended, into the workings of your SOC. Thank you very much for that, and see you next time. Which brings us then to our next presenter. Next up is Filippo Farina. He's Careers and Business Development Solution Architect at Radware. And he will talk to us about how Radware sees defense against DDoS at the different layers. Filippo, up to you.
Yep, I will try to share my screen just a second, and puff. So the idea for today, I will try to stay on time, but you know, I'm Italian, and to stay on time is a bit against our DNA and genetics, but I will do my best for keep only 20 minutes. The idea for today is, I mean, Radware is we are a vendor. We sell technology, we sell product, and we sell solution. But I will try to give you more on the technology side and what we can do to mitigate the modern or the different type of DDoS attack that I would say that are very well explained by Gérard, Andrey, and Nicolas in the previous presentation. So I will try to be very fast on the threat landscape, since I mean it was very well discussed in the previous presentation. But I think it is important because all the data that you see and I'm going to present, these are part of result that we collect using our Radware cloud, because you can, maybe you know, we are able to protect the infrastructure and organization through the Radware cloud services. And to the Radware cloud services, we have a full set of solutions that is from cloud DDoS mitigation to web security, web application firewall, API protection, bot manager. Okay, just from the historical point of view, it was already mentioned that the COVID changed a little bit the game, because I mean there was accelerating the digitalization for services. Many business went online, and we've been working from home for the first time. There was a huge growth for VPN access and online gaming. And also there is something very nice that I was part of a discussion with our internal Radware research team. And what was noticed is that due to the COVID, also the average age of the attacker has decreased, because having teenagers to be connected online in gaming room or trying to be more, let me say, stay in front of the computer and everything, it allowed them also to develop a lot of capability in terms of coding or developing software and everything. So what we observe is that due to the COVID, there was a kind of shift in the average of the attackers. 2022 and 2023, you know, it was very well explained. It was the war in Ukraine. There was the conflict in the Middle East, and there is a lot of increase also from the activism and the type of motivation behind the attacks. Something that we do see basically new. I mean, it was also explained, I mean, what we call the web DDoS tsunami campaign, where actually you have this very huge amount of web requests that, I mean, in terms of form, they look completely legitimate, but they are able to overwhelm the HTTPS application, or, for example, the API application that are exposed from the organization. This is something that we noticed from mid of 2023. We call this kind of attacks web DDoS, and we've been developing a solution for mitigating this type of threat. And something that we also are observing is that there is a lot of automation, and we see that there is a lot of AI, artificial intelligence, behind the attacks. I was very recently in a very large campaign in Italy against many finance or bank organization. And I can tell you, even if the attack vector was not that complicated, but the type of how the different vectors were used, because I mean, it was not just one single vector, but they were using, for example, different kind of vector at the same time, like UDP flood or UDP fragmentation or DNS amplification, or also SIM flood at the same time. And also the way that the attack were looking like, for example, they stay up for 5 minutes, they reach it, for example, 100 gigabit per second, then disappear for 5 seconds, and then we will start. And also the IP source in terms of rotation was very, let me say, very randomic. I mean, you can understand that all these kind of attack vector are designed for overwhelming or for try to win against the standard solution for DDoS mitigation. So probably just a standard approach or a kind of legacy approach to the DDoS is not anymore a strong approach. In terms of trends, again, this confirmed what was discussed before by the different presenter, but we also observed that the complexity moving up to the stack. So in the past, where basically network flood through UDP or TCP, the network, the classical layer 3 and layer 4 type of attacks. But now we see that there is a shift to the cloud, to the application layer, also to the cloud. And also, it was mentioned before, what we also observe is that many of these attacks are coming from public cloud. So solution like GeoFeed or geolocation, or trying to build a kind of list of country that you want to block, it is not very effective, and the side effects are very high, right? Because, for example, we do see that many attacks are coming from public cloud that are in Europe or are hosted in countries where there are also legitimate applications. So using geolocation, it's very, I mean, it can be very dangerous. They are still targeting DNS. I mean, DNS for us is still something very sophisticated. We see still a lot of DNS event. And this is the reason why, from the Radware point of view, we have been completing rewriting or recoding our algorithm for DNS protection, and same for HTTPS. We see a lot of attacks that are using HTTPS as a vector. And again, artificial intelligence is a strong tool as a first for coding, because I mean, you see that the complexity of the botnet or type of attacks is going to increase more and more. And also in the way the vector are used. You see that there is a kind of schema, they are polymorphic, they are changing over time. So you see that those are not very simple algorithm or script like it was in the past, but there is something more complex behind that is able to orchestrate almost more complex attack. Again, I will be very fast on this part because Benjamin in the next session will go more in deep on this. But again, just from the web DDoS attack, if you start to look in the last year, you see that there was a huge growth in the first half of 2024, basically more than 85% in terms of growth and size. And also in terms of size distribution, you see it is much more common to have very high rate of RPS from 250,000 to 1 million requests per second that are very common to overwhelm also the more sophisticated or powerful web application front end. Same for DNS. What we are observing, there was a huge growth. If you see, for example, the data and the number of query flood per 1,000 event, if we start from 2021, we see roughly less than 10 type of DNS attacks per 1,000 event. But then if you go to the beginning of 2024, you see that more than 86 events are specifically DNS event. And the same for in terms of DNS query, you see that the number of DNS query per year start to grow in a massive wave in 2024. Again, all the data that you see in this slide are coming directly from our cloud protection. And you know, we have a team that we call the emergency response team that is able to jump in a call with customers that are using the Radware technology. And again, these data are coming from the engagement the RT team is able to receive from the field. Let's see now what Radware can do for you in terms of mitigation. I do agree with what Andrey was saying, right? A solution for an effective DDoS mitigation has to be multi-layer. Multi-layer means that you need to face or you need to resolve very quickly different kind of threats depending on the different network layer. If you go in the complexity, probably the less complex type of attacks are network flood, TCP, UDP fragmentation. But in terms of volume, I mean, they can reach easily 100 gigabit. In our solution, what we have been developing for facing these kind of threats, it is a behavioral mitigation. What has happened that we don't need any kind of signature or something that was predefined in the system. We have an algorithm in our solution that is able using the behavioral mitigation to understand which are the common parameters in the attacks, and then building the footprint of the attack itself, and then a real-time signature. The real-time signature will be used for mitigating the type of attack. The side effect, let me say, is that there is a time for the algorithm to converge. And actually, in the worst case, in 80 seconds, we are able to produce the real-time signature for an effective mitigation. But then if you have polymorphic attack, basically you need to also the real-time signature is able to evolve and to follow the stream of the attack itself. Then if you go up in the complexity, what we observe a lot, it is the web application type of attack on layer 5 on TLS. For this reason, again, in beginning of 2024, we have developing what we call the TLS fingerprinting. I saw that there was a question in the chat. Basically, what we are able to do is to run a characterization on the client. You know, the TLS client LO is a clear packet. I have a slide later in the presentation, but basically what we do is that in peacetime, we try to do a kind of characterization building a baseline of what we call the citizen. So the legitimate user that normally accessing your infrastructure. And then when there is an anomaly, we are very fast in understanding which are the origin behind the anomaly. And again, using these mechanisms for fingerprinting, we are able just to drop the sources of the anomaly itself. DNS attack, when it comes to water torture, amplification, and reflection, what we did was completely redeploying and rewriting the code for DNS protection. Now it is powered for artificial intelligence, and really this part of AI that is a big buzzword in our market today. Basically, it is in the way that the algorithm works, because it's able automatically to move across different layers of protection or countermeasure, and they will do without the need of human intervention. Again, also for DNS, we have a slide in this deck. For HTTPS flood protection, we have a module that is dedicated for HTTPS flood protection, where actually, if you onboard the SSL certificate or the application, we can also decrypt the full HTTPS transaction. And then, for example, we can do the classic challenge and response mechanism for protection. We can apply traffic filter. We can apply also signature, because also in our box for application vulnerability or for known event, we have an IPS module that is able to do the classical string matching engine for understanding if there is an anomaly. Again, this is from the technology point of view, where actually you have the full set of multi-layer solution, but then there is a human factor, right? Because as I was mentioned before by Nicolas, sometimes it takes time to react to an attack, so you need to have in place a playbook and everything. And this is the reason why in this very big game of cat and mouse game, we are thinking also to a new solution for what we call predictive SOC framework, where actually the solution should be able to define or to build in real time a playbook depending on the specific attack that the SOC engineer or the SOC analyst are facing. From the standard point of view, this is a very old slide, right? I mean, Radware from more than 10 years, but basically this is one of the first slides that I saw in our deck. Basically, in our DNA, we have what we call a behavioral-based detection, right? So many solutions in the market or for the DDoS mitigation, they are using a kind of threshold-based on rate-based detection. Our algorithm is able, I mean, in different flavor or different kind of security engine, to have behavior-based detection. Means that we try to learn the traffic in peacetime, and then we are able to build a countermeasure when we do see an anomaly. Again, the time to mitigate and the time to detect will be dramatically reduced, and also the intention is to have a smaller number of false positives. So let's go more in deep on the TLS fingerprinting and DNS protection. So when it is come to application protection and encrypted web DDoS attacks, there are different layers of protection that we can implement. The first one, when we are able to detect a specific pattern for encrypted web DDoS, in this case, we can use the TLS fingerprinting. We don't need to decrypt the traffic. We just learn the legitimate client. Will build a baseline of what we call the citizen, and then when there is an anomaly, because we can understand that there are different clients that are trying to access or to overwhelm or to generate a very high level of RPS, we are able to drop or to make an action only on those clients. Again, we can implement what we call an active investigation for authenticated web transaction. And this is the classical web challenge response. In this case, you need a certificate, the SSL certificate of the protected application. Means that the solution can use the SSL certificate for different kind of, let me say, escalation mechanism. The first one, it can be a basic challenge response. And the second one can be the full decryption for applying, for example, traffic filter or different kind of a pattern or rule. And the last step, it is what we call cloud assist web DDoS. The idea is that, I mean, when the attack is start to be very volumetric and, for example, you are experiencing pipe saturation, you can easily offload the attack to the Radware cloud, and then having this communication between the local solution and the cloud for an effective mitigation. We call this model hybrid, where actually you can have the two layers of the solution working together. But we have a lot of customers that are working also in hybrid always on. So they have the traffic always passing through the Radware cloud for the volumetric part, But then when it comes to application protection and certificate and everything, since from the regulatory point of view, they are not allowed to export the certificate in a public cloud, so they need to keep the certificate on-prem. They can basically everything is related to our protection. They will do with the on-prem device. And something that also we are working on, because I mean, it is natural that when you think or you try to think to the behavioral mechanisms or learning and everything, a specific pattern, you must be in line with the traffic, because you need to build a kind of historical understanding of the traffic itself. What we are developing is a kind of, in particular for TLS fingerprinting, it is a mechanism where, I mean, in our cloud, we are able to learn what are the malicious pattern for this TLS fingerprint, and then we are able to enforce this pattern in a proactive way in your infrastructure. So, for example, when there are this very large campaign, your infrastructure, your solution on-prem could be ready for mitigating this attack. So let's go more in detail on the TLS fingerprinting or the encrypted web DDoS. I mean, as I say, it is possible to do a classification or a categorization of the client depending on the TLS client hello packet. This packet is unclear. There is a part that have some record extension and everything, and this basically allow you to understand how the legitimate client are looking like in peacetime. And then we built a baseline with the citizen, and then we have a detection engine that is able with different kind of metrics. Some are rate variants, the others are rate invariant, and basically every time there is an anomaly, we are able to detect this anomaly and to build a signature for dropping the malicious or the unknown client that are trying to access in your infrastructure. In terms of processing order, again, as I said before, the solution has to be multi-layer. There are different kind of layers that an encrypted attack can cross. The first one is the classical SIM flat protection or connection limit or SIM challenge, where actually if you see a lot of incoming requests of SIM packet, actually the SIM flood protection module in the Radware solution will be able to activate the countermeasure. Usually for the web DDoS attack, this is not really the case, because from what I observe is that they are basically using, let me say, a reasonable number of concurrent connection. So the connection rate would be very, very low. But then when the connection is established, they are doing a lot of transaction in the same connection. So probably even if you have in place a SIM flood protection module, this will not trigger a countermeasure. The second step is it is actually the TLS fingerprinting and the TLS behavior. In this case, it is very effective, because what we observe is that in almost all the campaign, we see that we are able to identify very, very quickly the bad actor, and then we can drop this bad actor. But in any case, if, for example, you have small leaking, or there are part of the attacks that haven't been dropped by the TLS module, you still have the possibility to run the traffic decryption, and then, for example, to run HTTPS challenge that can be, for example, a 302 redirect or JavaScript injection, and then to move up to the application layer. I mean, from the configurability point of view, you can decide to configure the different module depending on the fact that you are running in the scribing center, where, for example, you don't have the SSL certificate, or you are running in front of application, where actually most of the case the solution is already in the customer organization, and you have full access to the SSL itself. Okay. When it comes to DNS for us is still an important service. It is still, let me say, in the target of the attack identity. What we did was to apply the artificial intelligence algorithm in our engine for DNS protection. So basically, the solution is able to do the automatic detection, and then depending on the type of attacks to start different kind of protection mechanism. The first thing that the solution will do, if, for example, we are in line, we can learn the allow list, so the legitimate subdomain that are in use in your DNS infrastructure or in your organization, and basically build this list of legitimate FQDN. Or the solution can be configured for doing an automatic DNS zone export from your DNS services, because the idea is that if we do have an allow list of, let me say, legitimate FQDN, in case there is a water torture or randoming subdomain, like the Mirai one type of attacks, we are really able to understand, to do an automatic scoping and to understand very quickly if the query that the system is receiving is a legitimate query or not. But then if, for example, the attacker is using a legitimate FQDN, what we can do, it is trying to automatically escalate to the second layer of protection. The second layer of protection will do an anti-spoofing mechanism through a kind of NS challenge, name server challenge, where we are trying to understand if on the other side, we have a real client or we have, for example, a botnet that will not be able to pass the challenge. But then if this is not yet effective, we can still do to the last layer of escalation, that is the adaptive relay limiting. And so only for the FQDN that is under attack, we can decide to do the red limiting. Again, this is very well described in this slide, and the escalation mechanism. The last slide are dedicated to what we call the predictive software framework. So the idea is that you have a lot of noise, and the log and information that you have in the SOC is very huge. And sometimes it takes hours or days to solve a DNS attack. And then your SOC analyst has to pass through a kind of internal or mental procedure to understand what, why, and select the best and appropriate playbook for solving the attack. What we are planning to do is to basically from beginning of 2025, it is basically to release a predictive SOC framework that is actually an orchestrating for security control, depending on different alert that we can get from the network or outcome from the playbook. The idea it is to use the GenAI for building automatically a playbook that the SOC analyst can apply for the system, for example, for tuning different parameters. So I will wrap up. And the concept is that, again, it is a cat and mouse type of game, right? And we have for sure a roadmap, but also our development or our, let me say, roadmap, it is a kind of influenced by the real type of attacks and everything. The attacks that are powered by AI are something that we start to see in the market or in the field. And again, there is the reason why we are using the same paradigm for the solution, to be ready to mitigate this kind of threat. Sorry, probably I use more than my slot. I apologize for this, but I have basically finished. I don't know if there are some questions.
Yes, thank you, Filippo. There are two questions, in fact. Yes. So Andrey asked if you could comment on the challenges raised by the QUIC protocol for web security.
Yeah. This is basically, in the past, we had part of the behavioral is on UDP protocol. And in the past, the UDP protocol in our implementation were basically on just on the size, on the number of packets per second we do receive. What, for example, we did for trying to be more reactive to the QUIC was also to introduce a kind of ratio between the connection per second, the packet per second, and the packet size. The idea is that we can build a ratio or a baseline depending on different parameters for the QUIC protocol. And then when there is an anomaly, we should be much easier to understand if there is a kind of change in the normal metrics or type of QUIC request or QUIC protocol that you get in your infrastructure, or this is completely new.
Okay, thank you very much. And then we have a second question. It goes to what you presented on DNS.
Yep.
So the question is regarding the challenges in DNS protection. Did you mean switching to TCP with the TC bit?
No. Basically, what we do is that we emulate the server. Actually, in our configuration, you can decide if it is an authoritative or resolver. I mean, if you are protecting authoritative server, basically what we do is that we respond for the authoritative with a kind of token in the response. And then we do see if the following response are coming with the same token or not. if the request, the following requests are not are not coming back with the token, basically the client or the proxy is not authenticated, and we drop this request because most probably those are spoofed. So in the past there was the automatic change from DNS to UDP to TCP, but we do see that this mechanism that on the name server using this token is much more effective.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, welcome.
I don't see any more questions. So in the interest of time, thank you very much, Filippo.
Okay, sorry for taking more than.
No problem, no problem. We had Italian people in the chat, I believe, who understood you. Good, thank you very much. Then let's quickly move on to our last presentation. In the last presentation, you even get 2 speakers for the price of 1. This will be presented by Gilles Weber and Benjamin FALMAGNE from Telindus. And they will talk about how you do effective DDoS protection in the evolving DDoS threat landscape. Gentlemen, over to you.
Okay, so good morning and thank you for joining us today. So in this presentation, we'll be focusing on the evolving landscape of DDoS attacks and how we are working to protect our customers. As we learned on other presentations, these attacks are becoming more frequent, more sophisticated, and more damaging. So we know that understanding these threats is crucial to developing effective defense strategies.
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Gilles. I'm working in the Telecom part of Telindus. And first of all, I would like to thank Michel and the LU-CIX team for having us on this seminar. And then we want to take the opportunity to share with you our quite unique position to discuss this topic. As Telindus, we are on one side a telecom operator with a local internet platform exposed to these attacks. And on the other side, as ICT integrator, we are in direct touch with our customer base for security concerns. So to start, let me comment on some observations. I think we have already heard lots of that stuff today. I just wanted to pick out one figure. When I presented during the 2022 seminar, I mentioned the global attack number. And well, when we compare that same footprint today, we see a global increase of more than 34% over 2 years. War in Ukraine and the Gaza conflict introduced that politically motivated activism. But we also see new trends in the attack patterns, attacks becoming more complex, more tech-savvy, as said in the other presentations as well. But spoofing and the large volumetric attacks, as well as attacks on DNS systems, are still very common. So there is that sophistication gap where complex attacks are carried out using dedicated tools based on cloud technologies on one hand, and on the other side, we see basic attacks mainly through tools available in the darknet, which are still there as well. So therefore, it becomes very important to develop a defense strategy and have a DDoS response plan. It becomes very important. So to start with, let's have a look at what we have been doing. I would call it the traditional way up to now. As a telecom operator, we are running a national international internet network, and we have a volumetric DDoS protection service in place to protect our customers. And you see that on the right side of the screen in the upper corner, you have a very, very high level design of the Arbor infrastructure that we are using today to cover volumetric protections. How does it work? For a customer who has internet access, the activation is more or less immediate. Then together with the customer, we organize workshops to define the mitigation strategy and the corresponding templates. After that, the mitigation can start. It's done automatically, and we may fine-tune in case of an attack. We can do this by our SOC if required during that attack. We also foresee in our offering regular reviews of this, be it biannual or on customer demand. and which is also very important, and it has been stated earlier by Michel and also by Nicolas, it's very important for a customer to have visibility on what's going on. Not only visibility on during good times when traffic is normal, but also to see what's going on during an attack. Therefore, we have a web portal available where you can follow up what's going on. But let's share more information, Benjamin. You have some interesting information to share as well.
Indeed. So, as you mentioned, DDoS attacks are on the rise. So, to introduce your vision about DDoS protection and why we are taking this very seriously, I would like to show you again key trends in web attacks present in the official 2024 Radware report. So, it's also interesting to see that volumetric attacks like DNS spooks are increasing in the same times as shown in the DNS spook trends. I'm adding that we are observing a significant rise in web attacks along with ongoing growth in volumetric attacks. This highlights the increasing scale and complexity of these threats. We have already heard and know that attackers are motivated by geopolitical situations in Europe. The same Radware report shows that Europe is heavily impacted by this. Even if Europe accounts for 23% of the attacks, it represents 56% of the overall attack volume. On the right, we can see which sectors are most affected. While key global events can impact all industry, we can imagine that certain sectors are more disruptive than the others. I found this page on the Luxembourg's public website, show key sectors. We can see here that the top 5 most attacked industries include these key sectors in Luxembourg.
It's quite interesting.
This shows that attackers are paying more attention in key industries, especially in a region with strong financial and technological influence. We have talked about trends, but now let's focus on techniques. While I could spend much time discussing the technical aspects, today I will highlight the most recent volumetric and application layer attack techniques. As we can see, these attacks have become more complex than the traditional ICMP or UDP flutes. Attackers are becoming progressively more inventive, exploiting vulnerabilities in network protocol and manipulating how applications work to carry out more sophisticated attacks. In addition to advanced techniques, attackers have more powerful resources. With the increasing number of connected devices, DDoS attackers are using IoT devices and artificial intelligence to boost their capabilities. These IoT devices are often poorly secure. They can be easily hacked and turned into botnets. This allows attackers to create a large amount of traffic from many sources, greatly increasing the scale and impact of the DDoS attacks. Additionally, machine learning helps attackers to refine their strategy, allowing them to quickly adapt and bypass security measures. One of the biggest challenges we face is telling the difference between bad traffic and legitimate traffic. To address this, we use advanced real-time decryption solution. However, this can lead to increased latency and may not always comply with regulations for cloud-based solutions. As a local provider focused on customer needs, Telindus has developed a perimeter applications defense strategy that doesn't require decryption. This approach helps maintain privacy without adding latency or security risk. Not using a good defense strategy can lead to big losses in revenue, lower productivity, and damage your reputation. Recovery costs can also be high, and it will require a lot of time and effort for your engineering team. Plus, your company will be more vulnerable during attacks, making it an easier target for further threats. For us, a multi-layered approach is essential, combining the firewalls, intrusion detection system, traffic redirection, and rate limiting to effectively block malicious traffic. We also need to implement more advanced protection to defend against attack targeting API and web applications. Finally, it is of course crucial to ensure that all systems are up to date to reduce potential attack vectors.
Yeah, and this clearly shows the importance of a DDoS response plan, and therefore you need to consider the right governance, risk management, and compliance. So you need to improve the resilience and prepare for disruption to remain relevant and deliver value. Through the right governance, your organization's activities will be aligned with your business objectives. Activities include processes, structures, policies that are meant to manage and monitor company activities. Risks need to be mitigated through the right controls, policies, and tools. This includes measurement of risk, assessment, monitoring, again, identification and remediation. And through compliance, you ensure that your activities within the organization operate in a way that it is aligned with laws and regulations. Growing risk, as we see, and the lack of correct risk identification may have a harsh impact and poses challenges to every company not being prepared. And that is clearly what we are speaking about here. So at Telindus, we have a 360 security offering, which may help companies to work out a strategic DDoS response plan, and this in line with GRC. As trusted partner, we provide, on one side, telecom services as a national provider. Our solutions are based in our data centers in Luxembourg, and even our scoring center and the rerouted traffic remains in Luxembourg. So there is no need for traffic redirection abroad. As ICT integrator, we have all the competencies to support our customers with regards to security concerns, like firewalling, IPS, IDS, WAF, you call it, you name it, and all the other security solutions we can help. And our security practice, with a staff of more than 100 people, is available to analyze, to understand, and help our customers. Our cybersecurity team provides the security coverage you may expect from a trusted partner. Ben, and what does all this mean for our DDoS protection services?
So, indeed, Gilles, after everything we have discussed, I'm happy to present a logical overview of our cutting-edge DDoS protection. As a local provider, we offer extensive volumetric DDoS protection through our huge backbone, huge capacity backbone, along with customer-side solutions for both volumetric and applications defense. However, we recognize that this can sometimes lead to increase the latency and may not always comply with regulation for cloud-based solutions. That's why Telindus has developed a first-tier application protection strategy based on TLS metrics and behavior fingerprinting without decrypting the traffic and importing certificates. As Radware explained earlier in their session, another unique value of this is to focus on the source, basically the client profiling. We provide a full range of protection for every layers. It could be on-premise, cloud or hybrid, right here in Luxembourg, with multiple well-known vendors. What I want you to remember from this presentation is that application layer DDoS attacks are a serious growing threat to online services. Their complexity and the ability to mimic regular traffic make them very dangerous. To protect against these attacks, organizations need advanced security solutions. And finally, Telindus uses strategies like real-time monitoring, traffic analysis, and application-specific defense to protect our customers. I will conclude with this work, so thank you for your attention, and please feel free to contact us if you have any questions. It will be, of course, our pleasure.
So we have a question in the chat. So let's take 2 seconds or more, 10 seconds, to answer that question. So the question is from Vladimir, who asks, does your protection still work for customers with asymmetrical traffic, which is normal in case of multiple internet uplinks?
Well, that's a very good question. And I would say if you are in a multi-home environment, you need to protect all accesses. And it's for sure makes it much more complicated in the fact that you don't see what's going on the other link. So your thresholds analysis may be a little bit more complicated to do if you are in a multi-vendor, in a multi-homed environment. So that's something which must be considered during the design phase and the implementation phase. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for answering that question. And I don't see any other question, which means we are at the official end of this session. So the second instance of our anti-DDoS webinar. With that, I have to give a big shout out to our presenters. So all 6 of you in the 5 presentations. Thank you very much for providing your content. That was very interesting. And while I'm talking, is there a question? Okay. Gcore comments on the answer that you gave. So those interested, please read in the chat what Gcore answered to that. As you can see, this was a very interactive session, and for that I would like to thank both our speakers and our attendants. We had close to 130 people attending the webinar. This is very nice and very good to see. It means that there is a lot of interest in the market for the DDoS topic. So thank you everybody for attending. You made this a success, I believe. So thank you very much. To close, I would like to say that the recording will be published on our YouTube channel. Give us 1 day or 2 to finish this, and then all of those who registered for the webinar will get a notification with the link to the recording, so that you can either watch again or look back some of the things presented, or also if any of you colleagues could not be here today, with the link they will be able to watch the recording and get the information nevertheless. So with that, we are sharp 12 o'clock. I would say time for lunch. So thank you again, everybody, and see you next time.